What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanoz, aka Coach V, and we got another season preview coming to you here. We've done a whole bunch of them, so make sure you check out Gideon's and Cody's and mine as well here. But this should be one of the last season previews dropping, one of the last, as we talk about a wide variety of teams here, where we are going to talk about last season. We're going to talk about graduating seniors, key players, and then we're going to go game by game and predict every game and give each team a window of wins. Now, last season, I did the same thing for all of these teams here, and on this episode, we got 10 teams. That's Douglas County, Widefield, Thornton, Cedaredge, Gunnison Valley, Weld Central, Fruita Monument, Montrose, and Castleview. Talked about all of them last season. Gave them a, predicted record, a window of wins, as in a range of wins that their team will fall within, at least in the regular season. And so I do have some of the numbers from that, obviously, since the 2022 season has already been played here. But I'm just going to give this quick breakdown before we hop into these previews here. But there's one team out of the 10 here whose record I got exactly right, as in I predicted the number of wins exactly right there. And then there are 5 teams out of the 10 whose record I predicted, in the ballpark, right? I was in the ballpark with my predictions there. They fell within the window of wins that I predicted that they'd be in. So there you go. Then there are an additional 3 teams that I was just one game out of the window of wins, so not in the ballpark, but definitely kind of in the neighborhood, just a couple games wrong. And then there was just one team I was just wrong about out of the 10 on this one, so there you go there. Now on this season preview, I do have to keep saying this, but I'm not going to be able to talk about every single player here. I'm trying to just talk about key players, both graduating and returning, just because a lot of teams to talk about. I mean, we got 10 to talk about on this episode alone, so I want to kind of keep this thing going so that we can get to these predictions here. But I haven't forgotten about some of you players out there. A lot of y'all, I definitely watch a lot of y'all's film just to kind of get a good feel for where this team will be taking a step forward in, and what kind of projections we could expect moving forward from certain players. So that's definitely key here. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this one. To start out here, we got Douglas County here. Last year, I predicted them to go 4-6 with a window of wins anywhere between 2 and 5. They finished within the window of wins, just a game below my prediction at 3-7 here. Let's go game by game and talk about this schedule here that they had last year and the type of year they had last year. To start, they got a good win on the road, 23-20 over Horizon. That was a game that I felt like they could win there, and they won it in a close one. Then they played Thunder Ridge here. I thought they'd be I said this would be a loss here, which they did lose to them 56, so I did think it might have been a little bit closer, but hey, it is what it is. They would bounce back, but defeating Rangeview in a big one, 35-12, before playing Castleview for that Battle of the Rock over there. I said it would be a loss because Castleview returns a little bit more experience, especially at quarterback here. They actually ended up beating them 24-21. That is the first time that has happened in over a decade, maybe even longer than that, I want to say. So that's a huge win for them to get a second win in a row in that rivalry game. Then they lost to Fairview away 24-17. This was a close one here. I did say Fairview would win this one, but Douglas County might scrap and be a little bit closer here. So there you go there. Then they lost to Regis, like I said, 41-7. Chaparral, I thought they'd be able to beat them. They came up just a little bit short against them, 44-31. Braden Monroe had an excellent game, basically just on special teams, beating them there while doing his thing on offense. Then against Fountain Fort Carson, they lost 61-29. Pine Creek, they lost 38-13. And then I thought maybe they'd be able to beat Legend here at the end, but instead they lost kind of in a close one, 43-28. So there you go there. Wasn't completely wrong about this team. I had some things mixed up, but still in the ballpark for sure here. Now let's talk about some graduating seniors as they do lose some key players, starting with Chase Nelson, their dynamic speedster. He brought in 50 receptions and 903 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns as the lead guy, while also rushing for 266 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then on defense, added on 21 tackles, a pick, and 4 pass deflections. His production on offense will definitely be missed as he was the lead receiver for this squad. And then same as on defense as well. I mean, he just brought really good speed for this team. So for him to be graduating will be big. They also lose Avery Humphrey. The linebacker was the leading tackler with 80 and also had 9 tackles for loss. In addition, they also lose Aiden Phillips. He was the third leading tackler with 61, also having 2 interceptions and 5 pass deflections. And I believe he was also the interception leader with those 2. So there you go there. Altogether, it's not the worst for Douglas County. They graduate 6 of their top 13 tacklers. But their top 3 tackle leaders, will be graduating. So definitely some holes to fill there. Plus on offense, you are losing a stud in Chase Nelson, who, like I said, just brought a lot of speed to this squad. And so that's going to be a dimension that you might not have going into this next season. But speaking of this next season, let's talk about the key players that will contribute right away here, starting with Jake Stonebreaker. The incoming senior is a recent Kansas State commit and was a big-time athlete for this squad and will be going into his senior year. He was the lead rusher with 968 yards and 8 touchdowns, while also racking up 34 tackles and 7 tackles for loss from his linebacker position. I'm pretty sure he's going to play linebacker at K-State here, but the 6'1", 200, I think he's 200 plus at this point, pound linebacker will definitely take on a bigger role on defense while being the lead guy on the ground here. So definitely look to him to make some noise. They also bring back their quarterback Davis Lish as the first-year starting quarterback. He did okay, throwing for 1,024 yards, 11 touchdowns to 6 picks, while also adding on 313 yards and 2 touchdowns. I believe he's also a solid safety, but I just don't think he's getting a ton of snaps there anymore. But who knows? We'll see. Maybe he gets back in there. He did have some flashes when given a clean pocket and had some great performances throughout the season, specifically against Rangeview and Castleview. It's hard to see him taking a step forward without Chase Nelson, though, but if he can, then that could only bode positive things there, and at least he could take care of the football. That's the least he could do there. Regardless, he's a good quarterback coming back for them that should help open up the game, open up the defense here for Jake Stonebreaker. In addition, they will be bringing back Charlie Reed. The incoming senior is one of the biggest players here on the line. I assume he will play both ways again, but we're just going to have to see about that. He was an interior offensive lineman and then a defensive tackle. It's going to be much needed for a 5A team that kind of lacks some size, so look for him to turn up. They also have a guy in Leif Powell. This kid will be a rising sophomore, so I don't know if he's going to get a ton of snaps, but he's 6'2", 290. If anything, he definitely has the size to play varsity football. Now, if he has a skill, we're just going to have to see moving forward. But there you go. Those are the main guys to look out for here for Douglas County. Let's go ahead and predict their record here in 2023. To start, they play Horizon. I think this will be a close matchup. I believe they play them at home as well, so that will be a fun one. Horizon brings back a new coaching staff, which I think will be better for the squad, and so I'm going to say that's a loss for Douglas County, but could definitely go the other way for sure. I could see it going the other way. We'll just have to see what happens and, how well they start here. Now, Thunder Ridge, this is a team that's losing a lot of players. I thought last year maybe it'd be a winnable game, but it definitely wasn't. This year, Thunder Ridge is losing a lot, but I still think they'll be tough on the ground and playing defense, so I think that'll be a loss there. Then they play Rangeview. They should beat them. Castleview, I think this should be a win here. It may be controversial, but I'm just going to go with my gut and give Douglas County this one. This rivalry game will be another close one, but if Douglas County could win a third one in a row, that would definitely be huge. I also really worry about where Castleview's offense is going to be over there. And by the way, if they do win this one, Davis Lish and Stonebreaker would have won a record 3 Battle of the Rock titles, which might be the most out of any player here in Douglas County history. We'll just have to see. Moving forward, though, could definitely go the other way. You know how these rivalry games get. Then they play Fairview and Regis. I think those are both losses. Following that, they play Chaparral. I think that's a dub there. This may be another close game, but without Monroe, who went ballistic against them last year, I struggle to think how they can stop Stonebreaker and Lish. Chaparral, that is. And, size-wise, they're pretty similar up front. So, there you go there. I think this will be a lot closer than some will think. Following that, they played Fountain, Fort Carson, Pine Creek, Legend. Those are all really good playoff teams. I think those are losses there. So I have Douglas County going 3-7 with a window of wins between 1 and 4. I do worry about the size up front for them and the loss of Chase Nelson, who, did bring another dimension to this offense. They also play a pretty difficult schedule here, playing some really tough teams, at least 5 playoff teams here. I'm counting when it comes to their upcoming schedule in Regis Jesuit, Fairview, Fountain, Fort Carson, Pine Creek, and Legend. I don't think they win any of those games, so I think that's just a really tough ask for them. So we'll just have to see what happens here. I think they could make the playoffs if they get over or to 500, but that's not going to be easy. That definitely means they're going to have to beat, a Fairview, Regis, Fountain, Pine Creek, or Legend, one of the 5. So we're just going to have to see what happens there. Moving on here, let's go on and talk about Widefield. Last year, predicted them going 7-3 with a window of wins anywhere between 6 and 8. They exceeded those expectations by 1 win here. They went 9-1, so just 1 win outside of my window of wins. Not completely off here, but, definitely exceeding expectations here. Let's just go down the line here. They started the season with a dominant 26-0 win over Harrison, which I thought they would lose, but that was a big statement win. Then they went ahead and played Air Academy. That was a team that, I thought they would lose to, but I went to that game, and it was a great shootout, and they just outlasted them, playing very well in a key game, winning 42-34. That was one of the best all season, honestly. So there you go there. Following that, they played Pueblo Centennial, who they beat 55-10 here. Thornton, I felt like they could beat them, but they forfeited. So, a win's a win. Then they played Mesa Ridge. I said this would be a loss here, and that's what happened. They lost 48-33, but would go on and beat Gateway 33-0, Hinckley 48-0, Palmer 41-0. Centaurs 20-7 in a closer one, and then Liberty 48-6 here. So there you go there. They didn't play in the toughest league at all, but I still expected them to win those games. That would be enough to put them in the playoffs, where they played Skyline and lost 48-13, unfortunately, but still a successful year for these Widefield Gladiators. Now let's go ahead and talk about some players they are losing here, since they are losing a solid amount. Starting with their leading rusher, CJ Frazier. He had 396 yards and 3 touchdowns on 79 carries. I also want to throw in this other player, or 2 more players here in Braden D'Amatos Burrows. He was their power back, just behind Frazier with 349 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. And then Gabriel Segura was also in that conversation. He was the second leading rusher, and then D'Amatos Burrows was the third leading rusher. But Segura, he had 360 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns, while tagging on 37 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, and 3.5 sacks on defense. He was their second leading tackler. So, boom, there you go there. They're losing some solid players in their backfield at running back. They also lose their lead receiver here in Walker Matthews, who had 398 yards and 4 touchdowns on 27 receptions. So that's definitely going to be a tough replace there, as well as Isaiah Martinez, who on offense was their third leading receiver with 11 receptions, 177 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but was more, of a big-time player on defense, where he was a lead tackler with 42 tackles and 7 tackles for loss. Altogether, Widefield, they're losing a solid amount, especially more so on defense. They're losing 9 of their top 13 tacklers. That includes their top 6 lead tacklers. So they're going to have to replace some significant leadership up front there. And in addition, it looks like they're losing some guys here on offense, specifically all the running backs, some wide receivers, and I believe their center here in Todd Hill. So we're going to have to see how they respond to replacing all those guys, but to start, they're going to build around these players they have coming back, starting with their quarterback, incoming senior Paul Mitchell. He had a big season, as I expected, throwing for 1,439 yards, 8 touchdowns and 7 picks, while rushing for 172 yards and 6 touchdowns. Going into his senior year, expect the 6'3", 205-pound quarterback to continue his play and get better. You know, with so many rushers leaving, so many running backs leaving, I'm sure they're going to lean on him a little bit more and use some of his athleticism, as he is a tough runner as well. And did get to watch a little bit of him in the offseason, and he looks pretty sharp there. So it should be a big senior year for this quarterback, who is pretty talented, honestly. In addition, some guys to look out for is Jalen Sankey. He was a sophomore last year, but this year obviously will be a junior. He's a really interesting playmaker to me at receiver / corner, who I believe will take on a bigger role in the offense, whether it's at running back or receiver. He has some really good speed. I'm just going to say that, and he's a big-time playmaker, so look out for him to turn up. Last season, only had 12 receptions, but went for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. That bodes relatively well moving forward there. In addition, before I go to the defensive side of the ball, they do bring back their second lead receiver in Angelo Thomas, who had 19 receptions, 296 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. So he should be another receiver to look out for there. Now, on the offensive line, both, offense and defense, there are 3 guys returning that will be really interesting in Mickey Timms, Landon Deal, and Dominic Delgado here. They should bring back a solid offensive line and front 7 for Widefield. That should help them out significantly. Landon Deal specifically, he's 6'4", 260, and he's an exceptional tackle, and I think he's a next level guy, to be honest with you. So there you go there. They are losing some guys, some skill players, but at least they bring back their line, so you could definitely work with that there. And then they are also bringing in a very important transfer from Harrison, TJ Washington. He's played for them for a couple years, Harrison that is, but he will finish his senior year at Widefield. Like I said, a mainstay for Harrison at running back and linebacker, so he will help replace some of those lead tacklers they're losing. And then he brings, he's a tough running back. He brings that to the table here and should be the lead guy here and fill up both spots that are pretty open. And so this will be really exciting to have Paul Mitchell and TJ Washington playing together. This will be a really fun squad to watch, as TJ Washington is an absolute stud. So there you go. That's Widefield, losing some guys still on defense and offense, but they have players that they can build around here. I think their offense will probably be the strength of this team more likely than not. But to start, they play Harrison, TJ Washington's old school here. And I'm just going to say this is a dub here. Last year, Widefield beat them pretty handedly. This year, Harrison, they lose some guys up front as well as TJ, obviously. And I just got to give this one to Widefield here. They got Paul Mitchell, who's a very good quarterback, and then they have TJ Washington along with a pretty big line as well. So they should definitely win this one. Following that, they play Air Academy. This time it will be on the road here. I think this is a win. They don't have Sam Beers or their starting quarterback. Do have a couple guys here, but we'll just have to see about that moving forward. I think that's going to be a win for Widefield. Following that, they play Pueblo Centennial. That's a win. Thornton, I think this should be a win. They forfeited last year. They have a quarterback of their own over there, but they do lose their best skill player, so that'll definitely impact them. So that's the difference. Then they play Mesa Ridge here. I think that's a loss. This is a tough squad. Mesa Ridge is with a lot of firepower, and I don't think they are ready for that quite yet. Then they play their league here, which is pretty, one of the easier leagues in Colorado. Gateway, Hinckley, Palmer, Centaurus, Liberty, I think those are all wins in a row right there. I really like Paul Mitchell and TJ Washington heading up this team, and so this offense should be more than enough. Well, that's plenty of games for this defense to go figure it out. So there you go. I have Widefield going 9-1 with the window of wins between 7 and 10. They definitely have one of the easier league schedules, so that benefits them a lot. I just don't see anybody in there stopping this backfield. And as far as out-of-league games go, Harrison, Thornton, Mesa Ridge, those are games that I could potentially see them losing, but I really have them favored against Harrison and Thornton. So there you go. This offense should be a lot of fun to watch as, this defense tries to get it together and gel throughout the season here. But this should be an exciting year for Widefield. Okay, let's talk about Thornton here. Predicted them to go 5-5 with a window of wins between 3 and 6. Instead, Thornton, they went 4-6, finishing one game worse than predicted here. And I think I predicted most of their schedule right here. Let's just go down the line here. To start, I had them beating Skyview. Instead, they lost to them 12-6. I don't understand why they lost that game, but they did, so I was wrong about that. Then they bounced back, beat Niwot 32-27. Against North Glen, they lost, as I predicted, 52-14. Forfeit against Widefield, Gateway forfeited against them, but I still think that would have been a dub there. Then they played Hinckley. I thought that was maybe a game that, they would drop. Instead, they beat them 47-6. I also thought Hinckley would have won Dame Davis Jr., I want to say, so there was that as well. Then they played Palmer, who they beat 34-24. Lost to Centaurus 42-32, and kind of a closer one. Then played Liberty. I thought they'd be able to win this game. They didn't. And so they lost to them 22-6. And then I don't know what is up with this last game here. But it says Aurora Central apparently beat them 75-30. I don't think that's right, but I think that's a loss regardless, though. So there you go there. So that was their year. Just a little disappointing here. But, let's talk about some of the players they are graduating, as they are graduating some absolute studs here, starting with Isaac Gomez. He had a great season, catching 61 receptions for 1,046 yards, 8 touchdowns. Also on defense, had 31 tackles and 2 picks as the best athlete on this squad. Now he's gone. That is going to be a big loss for Thornton. They also lose Armando Morga. He was one of their lead tacklers with 39. They also lose Alfredo Castillo. He was one of their biggest offensive linemen who will be leaving, as well as Diego Hernandez and Aiden Lucero Barraza. So altogether, with those guys included, and some other guys that I haven't talked about, but I just want to keep this going. Like I said, they'll be losing 8 of their top 13 tacklers, so they do have a defense to replace here, plus some size up front, but they have some guys to work with, starting with their quarterback, Jose Paredes here. As a sophomore, had a pretty good year, throwing for 1,687 yards, 16 touchdowns to 8 picks, while rushing for 438 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, without Isaac Gomez, it's going to be interesting to see what he can do here, as they really leaned on Gomez pretty heavily here. And so this is going to be a real telling year. Regardless, I think he is a good quarterback with 1 year of experience under his belt. Loved what I see. Now we're going to get to really see him face some adversity, which will be interesting. Now, on defense, they are losing the majority of their guys, but they do bring back their lead tackler, and Demetrius Cavett. He will be a junior this season, and he had 79 tackles last year. And so going into this next season, he should probably be the lead tackler again, and one of the few returning players and leaders for this squad. Then last but not least here, this was another player I wanted to talk about before predicting the record, but that is David Williams. He was their lead back with 451 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Now going into his senior year, he's looking to maybe get a bigger workload, as they do lose Gomez here. He's going to have to play better, or at least be a little bit more productive for them to at least reach the production they had last season. So there you go there. But altogether, Thornton, they're losing, some significant players here. I think Gomez is going to be a big loss as he accounted for a lot of their offense. And then defensively, there's a lot of players gone there as well. But let's go ahead and predict this record here. To start, they play Skyview. I really feel like this should be a win. This was a close game last year. I think it probably will be this year, but they got a lot of the same players returning here. It will be at home. I trust Jose Paredes and this squad to win this game. Then they play Niwot. This was a close game last year, but I think Niwot just brings back significantly more players on offense, so I'm going to give the slight edge to them here. Then they play North Glen, Widefield. I think those are both losses. Following that, they play Gateway and Hinckley. I think those are both wins going the other way for them. Then they play Palmer. Palmer, I think, is going to be better than they were last year. They got some really good pieces over there between their quarterback, Pickern, who I don't know if he played in this game last year, but he'll be back there, as well as Julian Horsey at wide receiver, just to name a few guys. I think that's a loss. Centaurus, without Gomez, if it goes to a shootout, I don't think that's a win there. And Centaurus, they bring back key players on offense, so there you go. Then Aurora Central, I think that's a loss. They are losing some guys, but they do have some pretty good size up front, though. So there you go there. Altogether, I have Thornton going 3-7 with a window of wins between 1 and 4. They lost a lot of tacklers on an already bad defense, so it just makes me nervous. On top of that, they also lose Gomez, who was huge on offense and made up the majority of their production there. But they do have Jose Paredes, who I think is a solid quarterback, but he needs other players around him to step up, like a David Williams, who I think he will. Right, so we're just gonna have to see what happens for Thornton moving forward. Unfortunately, I don't think they win their league, and I think that's really their only way to make playoffs here. I think it's gonna be a rebuilding / learning year for them, and that's not a bad thing at all. And I think they will need the time to gel and get better as a squad. All right, next up we got Cedaredge here. Last year, had them going 6-2 with the window of wins between 5 and 7. They finished 4-5, so just one game outside the window of wins. Thought they would be a lot better, I'm not going to lie, but let's go ahead and talk about what happened this season. So to start, they beat Payton as expected, 27-0, but then they lost a close one to Grand Valley, 14-13. This was one that I predicted them winning, and so that's definitely tough. Then they beat Del Norte and Olaf 20-0, 42-0. Following that, they played North Fork here. I thought this might be a winnable game since North Fork was losing some key parts of their defense and offense. Instead, they lost 24-12. Then they played Meeker. I thought that would be a loss. They lost to them 40-0. Gunnison was another loss, 36-0. Then they did defeat Roaring Fork 34-8. And then last but not least would also play Buena Vista here, who they lost to 41-20. So there you go. They're a little bit of a disappointing year. You probably want that Grand Valley game back. Now, does that put you in the playoffs? Probably not, unless you beat North Fork, which they didn't. So there you go. Let's go ahead and talk about some graduating seniors. They don't have a whole ton, but they have a solid amount here. They lose Jackson Cooper. He was their third leading receiver with 18 receptions and 229 yards and 2 touchdowns. But on defense was big time with 40 tackles and 2 picks. They lose Ryan Brunk. He had 52 tackles and 6 tackles for loss as their lead tackler. On top of that, they also lose Cole Hawkins, who is right behind him with 45 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. So it's looking like the majority of the graduations or graduates here were on the defensive side of the football. On offense, though, they do bring back these 3 key players in Luke Maxey, the incoming senior. He played quarterback, obviously, and threw for 1,452 yards, 16 touchdowns and 9 picks, also contributed 155 rushing yards and a touchdown. They bring back their lead receiver, Brady Cooper, who will only be a junior going into this year, but he had 35 receptions, 562 yards, and 7 touchdowns, while on defense adding 36 tackles, 80 tackles for loss, and 2 picks. And then last but not least, they bring back their second leading receiver in senior Logan Tullis, who had 25 receptions for 449 yards and 4 touchdowns. So this is a squad that will be returning a pretty good offense that likes to throw the football a little bit here, and I expect them to hopefully take another step forward here. Also, by the way, they bring back the running back. I think it's pronounced, it's Ethan Toothaker. He had 193 yards and 2 touchdowns, but like I said, they definitely like to throw the ball here, so we will see what happens moving forward. But with that being said, let's look at their schedule here for 2023 and predict this the best we can. First, they play Payton. That should be a win. It will probably be closer than it was last year, though. So there you go. But regardless, still a win. That'll be in Payton, by the way. Then they play Grand Valley. That should be another win. This was a close one last year, but they do lose Stephen Hicks. I think that gives them the edge. Same with Del Norte. That should be another win there as they lose some significant firepower over there. Olaf here should be a win. But then they play North Fork. North Fork played them and beat them without Hayden Marino, who will be returning. I think this is a loss for them. Then they play Meeker and Gunnison, both losses. Their defense really needs to step up to stop those tough running games, and I just don't think they have it right then. Then they play Roaring Fork. That should be a win for sure, I think. Then they go and play Buena Vista away here. I think it will be a closer game than what it was last year. I just have a hard time beating Buena Vista kind of at the end of the season when they've had all that time to get better and gel. And I just think they're also deeper and bigger up front. So I have Cedaredge going 4-5 with the window of wins between 3-5. They should be able to beat all the teams they did last year, if not by a little bit more. I think the Grand Valley game is one they should be able to realistically win since it was so close, and they have a good edge in that. And I would say they may win the North Fork game, but I don't have them favored in that one. And if they do, that would mean they would only get to 500. The rest of the teams, I just don't know about them beating here. So should have a fun offense, though, to say the least. They'll throw the ball, do their thing there, but to get better, they need their defense to take a step forward, or, for the running game to really be a factor here in this 2023 campaign. All right, now up next, we got Gunnison here. Last year, I predicted them to go 3-6, but I gave them a window of wins between 3-5. They were one game better than that window of wins, going 6-3 in the regular season. So there you go. They're not too far off, but not exactly on the money. Now, in the regular season, they would go ahead and destroy Aspen, 45-0, which I thought would potentially be a loss there, but it wasn't. Then they lost Alamosa as expected, 21-7. Monte Vista, they lost that one. It was a close one though, 18-10. Then they defeated Buena Vista, which I thought would originally be a loss, but they beat them by 1 point, 21-20. Went on, beat Olaf, the Roaring Fork, Cedaredge as expected, 49-0, 38-0, 36-0. Played Meeker in a close one. I thought maybe they would lose that one, but they won in a close one, 23-21 there. So gotta love that. Then they played North Fork here, who they lost to 21-13, which is interesting. But regardless, they still made the playoffs where they played Centauri, and it wasn't the worst, but they lost to them 26-14. Now, when talking about graduating seniors, I can't do that to the fullest degree because they have incomplete stats here. The two guys that I know that will be big for them as far as departures go is Rocky Marchitelli, I want to say. He was their starting quarterback, and now he will be gone, as well as Peyton Fries. He played running back and linebacker, was super productive for them, and so he will definitely be missed as a key part of that offense there. Now, talking about key players, like I said, stats are incomplete, but I got two who should be big, starting with Royce Uhrig. He is the next guy up at running back. He's a tough running back, and I believe he will be an incoming senior, so they shouldn't lose too much over there on offense. They do like to run the ball, so it's not the craziest thing. And then Bridger Flores is another guy. He's an incoming junior running back, and he has some solid speed, and I think he'll be a big part of this offense that'll be trying to replace the likes of their quarterback and Peyton Fries here. So look to those two guys to kind of carry this team. Now let's try to predict this 2023 season the best we can here. Like I said, limited film. Or maybe I didn't say that, but there is limited film and not a lot of stats, so we're going to work with what we have. To start, they play Aspen. Even with the losses, I think they should beat them. Then they play Alamosa actually next. It appears that's a game that they just added on here. That'll be away at Alamosa. I think that's probably a loss. They are losing some significant players there between the Jones brothers. But they bring back Brant Jackson, the 6'4", 200-pound beast at wide receiver and defensive end, plus RJ Mize as well. I think that's definitely a loss for them. Following that, they play Monte Vista. This is another away game, but I think this is a win here. They are losing a significant amount of players. Gunnison, they've been extremely tough the last couple years with the run game, and I think the combination of Flores and Uhrig will make this a tough squad to beat Gunnison, that is. So they should defeat Monte Vista there. Then they play Buena Vista. I think for the first time in a minute, this is a win here. Buena Vista will be losing a lot, which obviously includes their quarterback, Hayden Camp, and Jacob Phelps. It's just difficult to assume that they're going to be able to overcome this Gunnison team here with it being so close. And I just think Gunnison, they're going to pound the rock and they're going to play good defense. So that's a hard game for Buena Vista to win there. Then they play Olathe, Roaring Fork, Cedaredge. All of those should be wins there. Meeker, that's another away game. They're playing a whole ton of away games. Or maybe that's just the games I've talked about here. But Meeker, I think that'll be a close one. But I'm going to give it to Meeker here. It really could go either way. But I like this Meeker defense a little bit better. Then they play North Fork. I'm going to call that a win here. They really should control the pace of the game and defeat them. And if they don't, and they, play to North Fork speed, that could definitely be a losable game. But for now, I'm going to give them the edge. Altogether, I have Gunnison going 7-2 with the window of wins between 5 and 8 here. I may be way too high on them, especially because they didn't record a lot of stats here, and I don't completely know how good their defense is, but I know they're well coached there. And then offensively, Oregon and Flores here, Oregon Flores will be tough to beat. They're going to run the ball, they're going to control the pace, and that's how they play football over there in Gunnison. I think this will be one of their best seasons here, actually. So, boom, there you go. That is Gunnison's season preview. Looking to run the ball and dominate. Simple as that. Up next, let's go ahead and talk about Valley. I predicted them going 5-4 with the window wins between 3 and 5. They were on the lower end here with the wins, but they went 3-6, so still finishing within that predicted amount. Let's talk about how this season went here. There were a couple things that went just a little bit differently. To start, they played Berthoud. That was a loss as expected, 43-7. Manitou Springs was a loss, only 36-35 though, granted. So there you go there. Fort Lupton, I thought that would be a win. But Fort Lupton with the upset 26-0 there. And so that was the first one I was wrong about. Then they beat Weld Central 28-13, a little bit closer. I did say it would be a hard-fought game, and it looks like it was. Wellington, this was a team that I felt like they could beat, and they did 51-22 here. They were a new program, so there you go. Lost to Platte Valley as expected, 26-12. Beat Prospect Ridge Academy as expected, 31-6. Then they lost to Bennett. I thought this would for sure be a dub here, but Bennett definitely exceeded expectations. Lost to them 51-12, and then as expected, they lost to Devlin 33-0 here. So a little bit of a tough year. There were some growing pains, and so let's talk about, well, first before we talk about the players returning, let's talk about the ones that they are losing to graduation, starting with Blake Herman here. He was their leading tackler with 78 tackles and 9 tackles for loss. So that's some good experience that they're losing up there. They also graduate Aiden Trujillo at 6'2", 280 pounds. He was one of their biggest players. He played offensive line and defensive line. On defense, he was a force. 38 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, which he led the team in. So There you go. But altogether, it looks like the majority of the players that they are losing here were on the defensive side of the football. Herman was, I guess, most productive one on the offensive side of the ball, and he was their third rusher with 144 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. So there you go there. But defensively, they are losing some guys here in Herman and Trujillo being the top 2 guys that they're losing. Herman being their lead tackler, and then Trujillo is their 5th leading tackler. So that'll be tough to replace, but, they still have a lot to work with here, starting with their quarterback, Carson Adolph, in his sophomore year. He had an all right year, throwing for 940 yards, 10 touchdowns, so only 3 picks. He also had 4 rushing touchdowns, so that's not bad. If he could continue to take another step forward, get a little bit more efficient, because his pass completion percentage here was 44%. That could really go a long way for Valley, but I think they have somebody here. They have a good quarterback here is what I'm trying to say, and that should be really important for this squad, and he will only be a junior going into next year, so there's that as well. They also bring back incoming senior running back Julian Ramirez. He was the lead rusher with 518 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, while bringing in 8 receptions for 137 yards and a touchdown. He will look to build on his success moving forward here, so that's another good mainstay to be bringing back. They also returned their second leading rusher here in Marcus Van Pelt. He will be an incoming junior this next season, but as the second leading rusher, he had 466 yards and 2 touchdowns, was also one of the more productive players on defense with 50 tackles, so that's another player to look out for there to help fill some roles there on defense. He was actually their second leading tackler, so that's definitely big time there. Then they have 2 senior offensive linemen, which I think are really interesting, and Kane Badan and Michael Stone. Both are listed at 250 pounds, by the way. Badan, he had 33 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, being super productive on the defensive line here. And we added him as a watch list guy. I was very impressed by his film, and so he should be able to take another step forward and help lead a defense that, isn't losing the majority of their squad. They are returning some key pieces, so they should still be able to figure it out. While on offense, they retained their backfield, which I think will be really important moving forward here. Now let's go ahead and talk about 2023, this upcoming season here. To start, they go ahead and play Manitou Springs in Manitou. I think this will be a close game, but I have it being a win here. Last year, it was a close loss there. This year, they lose some of those pieces. I think that gives Valley an edge. And by the way, Carson Adolph does need to play a little bit better for them to win, which I think he can. I think that's definitely doable. Following that, they play Berthoud. Berthoud's going to be tough this year. I think they're a contender. That's a loss. For Lupton, I think this time around is a win. Their defense, for Lupton's defense, is relatively intact, but they are losing their quarterback, which is a big deal because he was the initializer for that squad. So there you go there. But I think that's a win for Valley. Following that, they go ahead and play Weld Central here. This has the potential of being closer, I think, especially with some of the guys they bring back. And we'll talk about Weld Central here in a minute on the next segment. But I think they could squeeze out a close win here. It's going to be tough, but they could do it. Then they play Platte Valley. I think that's a loss with the return of Howdy Johnson and a couple other defenders. This will be a really tough game to win here. Could potentially go Valley's way if Carson Adolph really turns off, though. We'll just have to see. Prospect Ridge Academy, I think that's a win, though. Bennett, I think that's a loss. They are losing a lot, but their system is definitely simple enough where, they don't have to learn a whole ton, if you know what I'm trying to say. Plus, it'll be at the end of the year here, and so I think Bennett will be tough to beat. Devlin, they lose a lot of offensive firepower, but I feel like they still have a talented defense or a solid defense. This is definitely winnable, though, if Carson Adolph has a big game. I could see that happening as they do have an inexperienced squad. And then this team isn't scheduled yet as of today, July 20th, but Wellington, they're in their league. I think... I don't know. I don't know. Maybe this is controversial, but I think that might be a loss there. I just don't know if their defense can stop Tanner Gray and Cash Alchfager, who will be going into their second year on varsity and will definitely be dangerous. Altogether, I have Valley going 4-5 with the window of wins between 2 and 5. This is a bigger range here, but I think it really depends on the offense. If the offense can be more productive, then they will win them some of these closer games here. Defensively, I think they'll be fine around Badan there at defensive tackle, so they'll be good. I just think this offensive core, they need to take a step forward, and if they do, they could definitely be closer to 500 and maybe even over 500 and make the playoffs there. But they're going to have to win some games where, they're not exactly favored in. They're going to have to win some shootouts. I think that's the best case scenario for Valley, if they could force games into shootouts and trust their defense to win them the game. Okay, moving on though, we got Weld Central here. Last year, I predicted them to go 2-7. And they finished exactly that at 2-7 here. I think there were a couple games that were just a little bit differently here. So let's just go down the line. Lost to Bennett 38-7, which was expected. Same with Platte Valley, Fort Lupton, and Valley. Those were all games I thought they'd lose. They lost those 28-14 to Platte, 45-6 to Fort Lupton, and then 28-13 to Valley. Then they played Sterling here. I thought that would be a loss, but I also thought Sterling would be better. Instead, they completely blew them out 47-7, so that ended up being huge for them. Then they played University, who they lost to 47-6, Brush 44-0. They would beat Timnath, as expected, 47-17, so that was big. And then I thought maybe they could beat Arvada here, but they lost to them 23-21, and this was a close game. Arvada had some ballers really step up for them. So there you go. They finished 2-7 on the season. Now let's talk about some graduating seniors here, starting with Hunter Camara here. He threw for 563 yards, 2 touchdowns to 11 picks. Not like super productive, but obviously you want continuity at quarterback. That's definitely something you're losing since he was the starter last season. For I think all year. And then they are losing Marcus Feist here, or Feist, excuse me. He was their second leading tackler with 49. That's going to be a tough one to lose. They lose Chad Dakinga, I want to say, the 6'2", 240 lineman at 39 tackles. He was also a starter on the offensive line, so that's some size you're losing. They lose Bryce Ridden. He had 42 tackles, 2 sacks. Dylan Grenier, 31 tackles. Altogether, the damage for Weld Central, they're losing 6 of their top 13 tacklers, but 4 of their top 5 tackle leaders will be graduating. So that'll definitely be tough. But going into this next season, they definitely have some promising players coming back, starting with Marcelo Rossi. Hopefully I'm saying that right. But as a sophomore, rushed for 936 yards and 10 touchdowns in a little bit of a breakout season. Also caught 10 receptions for 136 yards. Going into his junior year, nothing should change. He should continue to be the workhorse. And I think he could even get better going into his junior year as well. So that's going to be really big for them moving forward here. In addition, they returned Cyrus Troutner. He was actually their leading tackler with 73 tackles at middle linebacker. And, he'll be leading a defense that aren't losing too many, but definitely have some holes to fill. So for him to come back, that's definitely going to be important. And then on top of that, they bring back Zach Miller on defense. He led the team with 4 interceptions, also had 10 tackles. He was the INT leader there, like I said, and should be an important return. And then I couldn't tell, I had to look at this max preps, but there's a Josh Britton here who had 342 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. Hopefully, I don't think he's a senior, so he'll be back along with a freshman running back who was, relatively important as well in Damian Ramirez. He had 34 carries for 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. So honestly, if they keep it on the ground, they can make a lot of games interesting. For sure, as this is a defense that should get a little bit better here, but they definitely have some guys to work with. So to start though, it's not easy. They play Bennett, although Bennett will be losing a lot. I think their system makes it pretty simple for them to just pound the football. I think the biggest thing I worry here when it comes to Weld Central is the size up front that Bennett has. And so I think this is a loss here, but potentially maybe they could steal it if they really slow down the game, or fast forward the game if the clock is running, and take care of the football. But for now, I'm going to call it a loss. Then they play Platte Valley. I think that's a loss. There's just not enough firepower there to match along with the defense. They play Fort Lupton after that. I think this could be a close win here. But I think Fort Lupton just returns a little bit more playmakers. If their quarterback really struggles, I think Weld Central definitely wins that one, though. So call that a toss-up, but I'm going to go on the safe side and say that's a loss. They play Valley. I think that's a loss. They return some key players, plus a lot more size here, so I do worry about that. They should beat Sterling, though. That should definitely be a dub. Following that, they play Brush. They're in a similar position as Bennett, so if they could beat Bennett, then they could beat Brush. But for now, I just need to see it. Plus, Brush, I think, has a better defense than Bennett, so that's going to be a tough one to win there, if any. So that's a loss. Timnath, I think, should be a win here, but it could be dangerous. It could go either way. I trust that Weld Central is a little bit more experienced here still, so I'm going to give this one to Timnath. Then they play Arvada. This will actually be a really good game here. It's going to be a battle between running back Rossi and opposing quarterback Lucero. It's going to be a close one, but I'm actually going to give this to Weld Central here. This would be a really good win for this program if they get it. And I think they can, if they slow things down here and, not get into too much of a shootout. But I also don't think Arvada's defense is that good either. So this offense could thrive, especially the running backs with Rossi coming back. Yeah, this will be a good one for sure. So there you go. Oh, and sorry, they play University as well. They're not scheduled yet, but I'm pretty sure they're in their league. University, I think, is going to probably be a contender this year, so I think that's a loss. Altogether, I have Weld Central going 3-6 here, with the window of wins between 1 and 4. Like I said, a little bit of a bigger range here, but I'm looking at the Bennett and Brush games as potentially winnable here, and so that would obviously go a long way. So actually, I'm going to say 1 and 5. Window of wins between 1 and 5 here, because those games are winnable. I think there is a good chance for them to go 500. They need to take advantage of teams who are definitely on the down low here and are graduating a lot of guys. But I do worry a bit about their offense, just finding production outside of Rossi there. That's my biggest concern. And then defensively, I mean, you return guys, but, there's just only so much you could do there, right? There's only so much you could do there. And so you got to get better on defense. We'll just have to see what happens, but they definitely got some pieces. They shouldn't be winless here. They should win at least 3 games, maybe 1 game at the very least, like if it's absolutely horrible. But, I really think they should at least get to 3 wins and then play some other teams close, which I think will be good for their program. All right, up next, we're hopping up a couple classifications. We're going to talk about Fruita Monument here. Last year, I predicted them to go 9-1 with the window of wins between 7 and 9. Instead, they went 7-3, so still within the window of wins, but losing some games here. Let's just go game by game here from the 2022 season. To start, they beat Grand Junction Central kind of close, 14-7. That's one that I definitely predicted right there. Then they played Montrose. I thought this would be a win. They did win 30-14, so that was huge. They would beat Skyline following that, 35-0. Then they played Grandview and actually played them extremely close here at home, losing to them 38-37 in overtime. It came down to Liam Zarka getting a key rushing touchdown to win them the game. I think also a conversion as well. So that was a tough loss. That would have been huge if they won. I mean, they wouldn't have faced them ever again since they're a 5A team, Grandview that is. But, still though, you got to be happy with where you were at there. Then they played Bear Creek, won a tough one here, 31-27. Then they lost to Heritage, 20-13. This was the game that I thought they would potentially win, but just slipped away. Grand Junction, they beat them 35-14. Aurora Central, they beat them 41-14. They played Broomfield. This was another game I thought they could potentially win here. Instead, they lost a close one to them, 21-14 here. Then they'd go ahead and beat Adams City as expected, 49-0. So not too bad here. Still made the playoffs, but At this point, I know there were some injuries and players missing near the end here, but in the playoffs, they would play Grand Junction Central again here, and this time beat them pretty handedly 35-12, before going to Vista Ridge and just kind of getting embarrassed 56-20. I picked them to win it. Even if they didn't, I thought this would be a close win, and it wasn't. Offensively, they just weren't doing what they needed to do, and then defensively, just too many missed assignments there. So there you go. But it is what it is. Still had a good season, I would say. I thought they'd be able to contend, but they just lost too much as the season went on. Now, speaking of losses, let's talk about the players that they are losing to graduation. Starting with their quarterback, Corbin Rowell. He threw for 665 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 6 picks, while rushing for a team high 848 yards and 12 touchdowns. Had a little bit of a stepping back here as a passer, but was a really good rusher. He was a really underrated quarterback that played well in the system, so he will be missed. They also lose Luke Bennett here. He was their lead, I want to say he was their lead receiver here with 264 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns on 14 receptions. On defense, though, he really made his presence known, though, as he was the lead tackler with 101 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and 2 picks. He was the interception and tackle leader for this squad, so that's going to be a tough loss there. They also graduate a key player in Kason Stegelmeyer. Unfortunately, his season ended very early on as he only played 4 games, but in those games ran for 384 yards and 4 touchdowns. One definitely has to think how far this team could have went if he was healthy here, but it just proved to be a tough loss as they lost close ones against Heritage and Broomfield before being embarrassed in the second round against Vista Ridge. So definitely tough there. They also lose Randy Gallegos. He's one of their big offensive and defensive linemen. On defense, he had 57 tackles there. Altogether, they lose 10 of their top 13 tacklers. That includes 4 of their 5 tackle leaders there. Bennett, Mitchell, and Gallegos make up their top 3. And then Kimbrough was right there at 5. So they're losing a good defense. They're losing a couple pieces in the offense that really made this team a complete team here. So that puts them in a tough spot. But they still return some talent here, starting with their incoming senior running back, Wyatt Sharp. He was their second leading rusher with 793 yards and 9 touchdowns. Took a little bit of a step back this season. And so going into this next year without Rowell and Stegelmeyer, one's got to imagine that he's going to be leaned on heavily to help carry this offense. Him and Amari Wilson, I think, will be the two that will be leaned on heavily. Wilson will be a senior this year. And so when Stegelmeyer went down, he actually stepped up and did pretty good here. Ran for 579 yards and 8 touchdowns. For this team to be as successful as they have been in the past years, Wilson and Sharp need to combine for at least 2,000 yards. I just got to be honest there. So there you go there. And then on defense, one of the lone returners is Jackson Smith. He had 50 tackles and 8 tackles for loss. He will be vital helping this team along moving forward here. So losing some key pieces here. I don't know if Fruita Monument is the contender that I thought they would be last year, but they should still be a decent squad. Now, let's talk about 2023. To start out, they play Grand Junction Central. That should be a win. Might be closer, but should be a win as they do lose some guys there. Then they play Montrose. Unfortunately, it could be a closer game, but I just think Montrose has more firepower, and they have a better defense, so I think that is a loss there. Then they play Skyline. Skyline loses their quarterback, so that should be a win. Grandview, they have to travel to Grandview, so it is possible, because it's on a Saturday, that we go to this game. I think this is a loss. Grandview, they return a good team there on 5A, so there you go there. Then they play Bear Creek the next week, another away game. Last year, they won a shootout 31-27. This year, if the same thing happens, if it comes down to a shootout, I trust Bear Creek's team to go ahead and beat Fruita Monument here. So I'm calling that a loss. Heritage, I think that's a loss. This defense will be really good, so we'll just have to see what happens there. Grand Junction should be a win. Aurora Central should be a win. Broomfield, I think, is a loss. This is definitely a trap game, especially because they play them at home. And so I think Broomfield is going to come out swinging here on offense, especially since it's at the end of the season and they've had time to develop here. So we'll just have to see. We'll definitely have to see here. But I think that's going to be a loss. Could go the other way, though, if they stick to the plan, play good defense, control the pace of the game. Then at the end, they play Adams City, and so that should be a win there. So altogether, I actually have Fruita Monument going 5-5 with the window of wins between 3 and 6. Look, losing Rowell, I feel like is going to be a big loss on top of the other guys they lose. They need one more rushing threat to go with Wilson and Sharp, but even then, this defense might be in trouble as they are losing a significant amount of experience there. So we'll just have to see how they develop moving forward. It could get tough, though, if Fruita finds themselves in shootouts here, which is where you really need a good defense, and you need more guys on offense to contribute. So we'll see what happens. I think this is still a good enough schedule where they can make the playoffs, honestly, but they need to go 5-5 at least. If they get below, then things could definitely get dicey for Fruita Monument, who I don't know if they're going to be given the benefit of the doubt if that happens. So if they go 5-5, which I think they can, they'll be in a good spot here. And I think this is just a team that they got to know, hey, can't get in shootouts. Defense, you got to play well. Offense, we can't have that many turnovers. We got to score, right? Plain and simple there. No turnovers, gotta score, control the pace. So there you go. That is Fruita Monument's season preview. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about Montrose here. Last year, I predicted them to go ahead and go 6-4 with a window of wins between 6 and 9. Nice. I had a lot of faith in them there. I felt like 6 games was maybe their floor. And it was, they finished 8-2 in the regular season, so within the window of wins there. Let's just go down the line and talk about this schedule, as they had a successful season in my opinion. Lost to Palmer Ridge at home 35-28, that's probably one you want back. Then they lost to Fruita Monument 30-14, that's tough, but I mean those were both games that I thought would be losses. They would play Erie though, and this was a game I thought they would lose, but they ended up beating them 49-40. That was key. That really got them going here as they played some tougher teams, but in lower classifications. Would beat Palisade 40-14, Lutheran 42-26. That game being a little close, but still controlling that one for the most part there. Then they played Grand Junction Central here. I believe I had that one as a win. Yeah, that was a win. And it was a win in the season as well. 51-20. Would also beat Falcon 49-6, Coronado 61-6. Mesa Ridge, I was at this game. This was a really fun game. I thought it would maybe be a little bit of an easier game, but Mesa Ridge did not go away right away. But they still beat them 46-31 in a shootout. So very impressive win there. Then finally they played Pueblo West at home. I thought they might lose this one. I also thought Pueblo West would throw the ball. They didn't. They ended up beating them 35-28 here in a close one. So gotta love that if you're Montrose. They head into the playoffs here. I believe, I want to say they had a bye. Then they played Golden here, who, it was a little controversial. They beat them 47-43. Golden was trying to, mount a comeback. They kicked an onside kick. It definitely looks like a Golden player got there, and recovered the kick after it went 10 yards, but they ruled it the other way or something like that. It was something with that onside kick, and so they ended up winning 47-43. I'm not going to talk too much more about that. I mean, Golden, they put themselves in a position to be coming back from behind, and they just couldn't get it done, plain and simple. So there you go. Now they played Loveland here. This was away here at Loveland, and this was a cold one. This was one of 2 games going on this Friday night. The other one was Valor Christian versus Regis Jesuit. And so in the freezing weather, they unfortunately just came up a little bit short, 20-15. They had one last drive at the end, but they just couldn't quite put it together. That's a winnable game, and honestly, it just sucks that they were not able to get that one done, as Loveland would eventually go to state here, where they lost, but still playing a team that went to state. I mean, close like that, that's never a bad thing. So a little bit of a disappointing season for Montrose, but honestly, you got to feel good about this team and how they did this season. Now, they are graduating some pretty important pieces here, starting with Torrey Eckerman. He really emerged as a solid second rushing option, running for 926 yards and 12 touchdowns, going crazy on the season there. I did not see him coming through as a breakout guy, but he was, and he built on the past season on defense, tagging on 73 tackles, 19 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. He's a tough athlete that played both ways. He's going to be very much missed there. So there you go. They also lose to Marion Lopez. He was a big athletic lineman who was in consideration for all PMC, but we couldn't quite get his stats quick enough. Although he did tag on 88 tackles and 30 tackles for loss at defensive tackle while also playing offensive line. Like Ackerman, that's production that won't be easily replaced there. They also lose Junior Rodriguez. He was right next to Lopez, as he had the highest number of tackles with 65 here. Or, sorry, not the highest number. He had the next highest with 65 tackles right there next to Lopez. So that's going to be a tough one to be replacing there. Altogether, it looks like they're losing 6 of their top 13 tacklers. But it is 3 of their top 5 leading tacklers that are gone in Lopez, Ackerman, and Rodriguez. So that is going to be a tough go for them. They got to replace some leadership there along with that production. So we'll see what happens. But definitely not the worst. But they do lose a couple offensive linemen. But, they have some good size coming up and potentially filling their roles. So I'm not as worried about that. Now let's go ahead and talk about some key players, starting with Blake Griffin, not the basketball player, the standout running back out of Montrose here, who had a career year, a breakout season, running for 2,061 yards and 26 touchdowns here. He also caught 15 receptions for 190 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. He will look to continue to build on that dominance with another big senior year, as he is one of the best running backs in the state, has good speed, and probably has the best contact balance out of any running back in the state. He's tough to tackle. He sheds tackles like crazy. He's going to be one to look out for, as he will be the engine to this team moving forward. Now, in addition, they bring back the quarterback, Gage Wareham. Obviously, he doesn't, throw the ball a whole lot. He took a slight step back in that category, only throwing for 698 yards, 6 touchdowns to 4 picks with a really tough 37% completion rating. But he also rushed for 104 yards and 4 touchdowns. Maybe it's because they fed Griffin and Ackerman a little bit more here. But he does need to be a little bit more efficient for them to win more and, produce a little bit more on, at quarterback on this offense here, since they will be losing a big one in Ackerman, and they got to find a way to replace him. So there you go. Now, before I talk about the defensive side of the ball, I do want to talk about Austin Zimmer. He's a senior as well, incoming senior. He was the 3rd leading rusher on this team, going for 552 yards and 7 touchdowns. Look for him to turn up next to Griffin and Wareham to form a pretty tough backfield here and take another step forward. So there you go. This offense should look pretty similar here. Now, on defense, they have a guy in Jackson Killen here. He was the lead tackler with 125 tackles and 29 tackles for loss. Will be an incoming senior. Now, this defense does lose some pieces, but you gotta feel good about your lead tackler returning here, along with about half the team here on defense. So even though they're gonna have to replace some guys, I think they will probably be fine. So boom, there you go there. Montrose looking to have another big season and maybe even go to state and win it. Now, to start the season here, they go ahead and play Palmer Ridge. I think that's a dub. They lose a lot. Palmer Ridge loses a lot from last year between their backfield, Jackson St. Aubin, their head coach. That's going to be at Palmer Ridge. I'm looking to be at that game. I'm going to give Montrose the edge here and the win. Then they play Fruita Monument. This should be a win. They return a lot more than Fruita. And so with that being said, this battle will come down to Montrose just having more players on offense that could produce there. Then they play Erie. I'm going to call this a dub. This has the potential of being another shootout. But Erie won't have Caden Lettuce or Trey Kana. I think Montrose could really challenge them here and win, especially because they have to make Erie make that trip. So I think that's a winnable game. Then they play Palisade, Grand Junction Central, Falcon, Lutheran as well in that mix. I think those are all wins. Lutheran will probably be the toughest game there, but as long as they, control the pace, don't have too many turnovers, they should be fine. So that's 4 wins in a row there. Palisade, Lutheran, Grand Junction Central, and Falcon for Montrose. Then they play Mesa Ridge at home here. I think that's going to be a dub for Montrose. Mesa Ridge, they lose a good one in Carver Cheek, so that definitely concerns me here. And I don't know if this defense is good enough to stop Montrose yet, so I think Montrose wins that one easily. And then at the end here, they play Pueblo West. Unless they decide to pass some more, I think Montrose easily wins this one. Also, by the way, Coronado, they are in their league as well. They're not scheduled yet, but if they play them, that's a win. So altogether, I actually have Montrose going 10-0 with a window of wins between 8 and 10. Bottom line, this is a contending team here. They are a team that could not only, win a bunch of games in the regular season, but they could beat a lot of teams in the playoffs and go to state. They are extremely tough to beat with guys like Blake Griffin, Austin Zimmer, Gage Wareham. I think those 3 will be the big 3 on offense and really lead this team to another successful season. Then on defense, I trust their defense to figure it out as they go. And so I think they're going to be one of the prime contenders for the state championship in 4A this season. They're going to be a really tough team to stop here. So there you go. That is Montrose's season preview. Coming up, we got our last team here. This was the team that I was just straight wrong about, and that is Castleview. I predicted them to go 7-4 with a window of wins between 5 and 7. They honestly had a horrible year, and they finished 2-8, well below expectations in an extremely disappointing way here. Now, let's just go down the line, talk about their schedule. They took off Lewis Palmer, who they were supposed to play here. I think that would have been a win. So there you go there. But let's just go down the line and see what they have here. To start, they played Doherty, beat them 31-21 as expected. I did think that'd be a close game. It was, but they came out on top. Then they played Pooter. This was a weird game here, mind you, as there were a lot of delays. Gideon was at that game. But they lost it 14-10, and I'm going to be honest, they had way too many turnovers to win that game. And I don't know if it was because of the delay or what. Maybe they're just not, I don't know. Maybe they're just not in sync here. But that was just a very questionable loss there. I think they definitely should have won there. And that was maybe the beginning of the end, as they would go on and play Legend. I was just wrong about Legend in general, so they lost them 49-21. Then they played Douglas County. I think this was one of the backbreakers here. They lost to them 24-21. This was a game that I felt like they could have won here, and they could have avenged their loss. I did think it was going to be a close game, but they just fell short. They fell short and lost this one 24-21. And so that's definitely tough there. I also did say I thought they would beat Cherokee Trail, who they played the following week, but instead they lost 21-14 here. Oh boy. And this is where it really got tough here. If they couldn't win those games, they definitely weren't going to win some of their league games here, as they lost to Valor 45-17, Thunder Ridge 35-6, Mountain Vista a little bit closer, but still lost 38-21. Rock Canyon, they lost 28-3, and then Highlands Ranch. This was a game I thought they could win. They at least won the last game of the season, beating them 23-14. So a very different record here. Just lost a lot of their non-league games. A lot of close ones here. Pooter, Douglas County, Cherokee Trail. If you win those, you get to at least 5 wins. But just even then, it's just disappointing for them to lose this many games there. So there you go. Now let's talk about graduating seniors here, starting with Nathan Schmidt here. He had a horrible season, and I thought he was going to be so much better, and he just wasn't. He threw for 760 yards, 3 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, had a completion rating of 50%, did rush for 449 yards and 6 touchdowns, but he also had 3 fumbles there. So combining everything, he had more turnovers than touchdowns, with 13 turnovers to only 9 scores. This was highlighted by a terrible 4 interception performance against Pooter, where, he just wasn't taking care of the football, throwing it up there, and it just wasn't working out. And so you kind of just saw his pass attempts get lower and lower after that. And yeah, after the first 2 games, they would not allow him to attempt more than 20 passes and up. So there you go there. I'm going to be honest, I think he was a big reason why they lost a lot of their games. I thought he was going to be better. He was not even what he was last season. He unfortunately regressed. And then they also lose Joe Aceta. He was their lead rusher with 922 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns. With the collapse of the passing game, he was really leaned on to carry the team, and he did a good job. And so he will be missed as well. That's going to be a tough one there. They also graduate Yusuf Thornton. He was their middle linebacker and lead tackler with 111 tackles and 7 hurries. That production will be missed there. And then a couple other guys they're missing, Peyton Walker, Ace Malone. Neither played their senior year, which I think contributed to why they underachieved here. And that will probably make the difference in some of their close games. I don't know if they get to 7 wins, but it probably would have made a difference in their close games. Looking at their defense, they're only losing 6 of their top 13 tacklers, so it's not the worst that it could be. Now, enough about the past. Let's talk about the present. Let's talk about the future. Jordan Ochoa, he's going to be one of the key players returning. The 6'5", 225-pound defensive end is one of the best in the entire state here. He was definitely somebody who caught my eye looking through film last year, but I needed to see one more season to see if I could put him on our watch list. And, he did really good that 2022 season, racking up 64 tackles, 2 sacks, and a whopping 37 hurries here. And so he is definitely on our watch list, and he's a potential depoy, all-PMC, top 5 senior edge rusher guy. We're just going to have to see here. And he just committed, not just committed, but he committed to Wyoming, and so good for him. He's found a home already. Now it comes down to having a good senior year here. And, he had 37 hurries. If he could even convert a third of those to sacks, that'll be huge for Castleview this season. But no doubt he will be one of their best players, if not their best player, period. They also return Ryder Smith, the 6', 255-pound guard / defensive tackle. On defense was relatively productive, tallying 38 tackles, 2 sacks, and 13 hurries. At guard, he was a key part of this offense, and he is an incoming senior like Ochoa, which, by the way, they're both 6'0" guys. And so I think he, just like Ochoa, is due for a big senior year here. I think he can play guard on the next level. He will need to get bigger, but that's not the biggest concern, honestly. So there you go. They also bring back Ben Knox, the incoming senior safety. Was used mostly on defense last year, but don't be surprised if he's the next guy up at running back for Castleview. But anyways, on defense, he had 49 tackles, 2 picks. His return for this defense will be absolutely huge. So there you go there. They also bring back Jonathan Nieto Villa, the incoming senior linebacker. He's 6 foot, 220, so good size there. He was also their second leading tackler last year as a junior with 98 tackles, 2 sacks, and 12 hurries. He returns with a very solid defensive group. And then last but not least, we have Sam Harry here. He was a sophomore last year, so a junior this year, but he will be one of their more important pieces on offense as he was their lead receiver with 24 receptions, 331 yards, and a touchdown. If they could find a quarterback who can, properly get him the touches and get him the ball, that could go a long way here. So there you go, Castleview. They should have a pretty solid defense here. And then on offense, they got some pieces. They have an all-right offensive line here. I know they do lose, I think, their center, but I think they will be fine in the long run. Now let's go ahead and look at their schedule here and predict it. To start, they play Doherty away at Doherty. I think that is a dub for Castleview there. Their defense should be able to rattle a new quarterback over there. Now Ochoa will have his hands full with Maddox Richardson over there, but I think he could find a way to get it done. Then they play Pooter. I think this is another win here. Even with their offensive losses, I just don't think Pooter has that many weapons on offense to beat Castleview. And even then, I think this Castleview defense should do a good job and win it. Honestly, if they don't turn over the football, they probably win that game last season. So just don't have like a million turnovers, and you probably win the game this season. Then they play Legend. That's a loss there. Legend's going to be probably a top 5, top 3 team in the state, so don't expect them to win that. Then they play Douglas County. I'm going to call this a loss. I think it's winnable, and it's a toss-up game in my eyes, but I'm concerned about the offensive firepower. they gotta be better than where they were last year, and so hopefully, they could pick it up and pick up their share and help this defense out, who I think is going to play really well against the likes of Davis Lish and Stonebreaker here. But you need your offense to score to win games, plain and simple. All right, so I'm going to call that a loss, just being on the safe side of things. Then they play Cherokee Trail here. I think that's another loss. It could be winnable, but with Elliott Ming, Noah Collins, Peyton Summers coming back for them, that's going to be a really big challenge for this defense. So it's going to come down to Castleview's defense versus Cherokee Trail's offense. This could be a good one here, straight up, but we'll just have to see. For now, I'm going to call it a loss, though, until I feel more confident about the offense, honestly. Then Valor Christian, I think that's a loss. Thunder Ridge, I'm going to call that a win. They should be able to beat them unless Thunder Ridge gets a breakout quarterback who could be super productive. But without Okuno, without CJ Reese, Cole Hanchett, Cooper Kier / DJ Bordeaux, I just think Castleview could slow down this game here and win it. Then they play Mountain Vista. That's a loss. Rock Canyon, I think this could be a closer matchup here. It just kind of depends where this offense is, but I'm going to play it safe and call it a loss here. Then they play Highlands Ranch. That should definitely be a win. I think their defense should be good enough to win them that game. Altogether, I got Castleview going 4-6 with a window of wins between 3 and 6. Look, they return a very impressive defense, and I feel like, they could stop plenty of opposing teams' offenses they're going to be really good, right? They got some real good talent over there, but there are some also very real concerns about the productivity of the offense. I'm not giving them losses because of their defense. I'm giving them losses because I don't know where this offense is going to be. They're just not returning the most experience in their skill group, and after last year, it definitely concerns me with what they had. So if they can't take a step forward and be, at least average to above average, I think best case scenario, they could beat Doherty, Pooter, Douglas County, Cherokee Trail, Thunder Ridge, and Highlands Ranch. But I see Thunder Ridge and Cherokee Trail probably as a little bit of a stretch here. Douglas County is definitely closer to 50-50 to me because that is a rivalry. But, we're just going to have to see how Castleview does this year. Like I said, I like their defense. They should be tough. They'll be actually really fun to watch, in my opinion. Offensively, there's going to need some work to be done there, and they're going to have to come a long way from where they were at last year to deliver them a couple more wins. So we'll just have to see what happens moving forward for them. Either way, that'll wrap up this episode of the Playmakers Corner podcast. Thank you so much for rocking with us. We are almost done with all of our season previews here. I believe there is one more season preview that will drop, and I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. It's going to be a 3A/2A season preview about Luther and Evergreen, that conference. Plus, we'll talk about Englewood, Kent Denver West, Alameda, Lewis Palmer on that one as well. So it should be a really good one, so tune in for that one. And if you want to stay up to date, make sure you follow us on social media at Playmakers Corner. That's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Also, we're on YouTube as well, so follow us, subscribe to us there. And then we're on Twitter at Playmaker Corner. Tell us what you think about some of these predictions as we are getting closer and closer to the 2023 football season, and are posting a lot of content between season previews, interviews between players, and we will have a couple interesting surprises with these interviews as we approach the season. And then watch lists, those should be dropping if they're not already done. But thank you so much for supporting us, and you know what? I'll catch you later.